I know you're Scott Calvin. You know you're Scott Calvin. So let's make this simple. I say name, you say Scott Calvin. Name.
Kris Kringle.
Name.
Sinterklaas.
Name.
Père Noël. Babo Natale. Père Nicole.
Popo Gijo.
Popo Gijo gets me every friggin' time. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Psych Podcast, the podcast where psychology meets film. I am your host, Dr. Alex Swan, and Merry Christmas, everybody. This episode, it's just going to be me and you, listener, and we're going to have some holiday cheer. We're going to be talking about the seminal Christmas classic, The Santa Claus. Don't forget the E at the end because it's a legal comedy. A legal comedy, yeah, because it's a clause, a contract. He puts on the suit. You put on the suit, you become Santa Claus. You just did the thing. You did the thing, person. Oh man. This has been a yearly movie in my household, and I gotta say, now that I'm watching it with an eye toward psychology and all of the things that I've talked about over the last several years with so many great people, I just watch movies with a different lens now. I mean, not to say I don't enjoy them, but I do look for movies now to be on the pod a little bit more, I will say, a little bit more than what you find on the lists. So that's what I thought of about a week ago when we watched The Santa Claus, when the family and I watched The Santa Claus for our Christmas movie. One evening, I think it was a Friday night, last Friday night or whatever, we watched the Santa Claus, and the kids have seen it before, but they're a little bit older now, and so they can, they're about Charlie's age in the movie, and so we watched it, and I'm like, there is so much stuff. There is so much stuff in this movie that I want to talk about for this podcast. I think we're gonna have a bit of a shorter one this time because, I don't want to ruin a Christmas movie, although it is Tim Allen, but I don't really want to ruin the movie. And so, we'll go through it. I've got some words. I've got some words for Mr. Tim Allen. I've got some words, All right. So just a background of this movie. The Santa Claus is a 1994 movie. You knew that because you watch it every year, listener. 1994. So it came out about the same year as Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Starring Tim Allen. This was his baby. This was his vehicle. Directed by John Pasquin, who was a kids movie director back in the day. Written by Leo Benvenuti and Steve Rudnick. Other stars of the movie, which went on to have either really great careers or were having really great careers. Judge Reinhold. I'm going to be talking about Judge Reinhold quite a bit in this episode, so be waiting for that one. Wendy Crewson, she plays Charlie's mom, and Tim Allen as Scott Calvin's ex-wife. David Krumholtz, in one of his earliest roles, which is quite cool. He did the second one. I don't think he came back for the third one. But he makes a cameo, a special guest star cameo in one of the episodes of the current Disney Plus series, The Santa Clauses. So he comes back for that. And then Peter Boyle has a really sort of throwaway role, but like it's awesome that he was in it, which is really cool. And then Eric Lloyd plays Charlie Calvin, which he has been in. He was in all 3 movies, which is great. You get to see Charlie grow up, which is excellent. But he only has a special guest starring role in the Santa Clauses. Now, I have not seen the Santa Clauses. So if you're familiar with this and you've decided to watch it, good on you. I don't think I will. I kind of like the nostalgia that I get from the Santa Claus and perhaps the Santa Claus 2. I don't really like the Santa Claus 3. So those the first 2 I have some nostalgia for. But especially the first one, which is what we're talking about today. But I love Martin Short. Don't know why Jack Frost was in that movie. That was a weird movie. And not well acted. Tim Allen's not really in it all that much. So it was like, let's make some more money kind of movie. And I don't really like the let's make some more money kinds of movies. Before I continue any further, you might hear some congestion in my nose. I might take some sniffles here and there. I'm just coming down from a cold. Weird. Just like I thought I got out of it. And then I started continuing to wake up with lots and lots of snot. So you might hear that in my voice as we go through this. All right, let's talk the Santa Claus. Okay, the Santa Claus. Again, Tim Allen. Now, I'm going to start with Tim Allen as we go through this. Tim Allen is not a good dude, in my opinion. Not a good dude. I like this movie. I don't like Tim Allen in it anymore. I love Judge Reinhold. And I love Charlie. And I love the elves. I do not like Scott Calvin. And you're kind of not supposed to like Scott Calvin. And then you sort of are supposed to turn, or he's supposed to turn a new leaf, and then you're supposed to be like, oh, he has character growth, and that's great. He kind of doesn't really have character growth, though, and he sort of falls back into the same kind of character in Santa Claus 2, so it sort of undoes what he is supposed to do in his growth, and maybe I'm conflating the 2 characters, and they are 2 different movies. But Tim Allen is not a good dude. I like many of the roles that he's had. Of course, I love Buzz Lightyear, and he did a great job with Buzz Lightyear. Maybe not in Toy Story 4 as much as the other ones, but, he has some great characters. I love Galaxy Quest, and he plays a great parody of William Shatner in that movie, and I love it. But Tim Allen is not a good dude, and that colors how I view this movie now. And it's sort of he becomes a caricature of both Scott Calvin and Tim Allen, and he was riding the high of Home Improvement into this movie, like that vehicle, like he was launched into stardom. Let it be remembered that in the 70s, he was arrested for trying to smuggle cocaine in his drawers, in his bottoms, as his undies, in Michigan, and he served some time in jail. He had served some time in prison, I believe, in state prison. And that was in the 70s, but like, get that all behind him. He got some early sitcom acting in the 80s, and then boom, right at the end of the 80s there, Home Improvement, early 90s, launched him into stardom. Like, that was one of the most popular TV sitcoms at the time in the 90s. That was, TGIF. I don't even know if it was on TGIF. It was definitely an ABC show. I remember that. For non American listeners, ABC's American Broadcasting Corporation, and owned by Disney. So he had a lot of cred with Disney. So this is a Disney movie. Santa Claus is a Disney movie. He ended up being in a Pixar movie, of course, that not Disney at the time, but eventually became Disney not too long after that. So, like, he had a lot of sway with Disney execs, which is why he was, probably given this role. And you're gonna wear a fat suit. You're gonna wear a big old bushy beard. Do you want to do this? It's kind of up your alley of comedy, Tim. Just jump into it. And I think he did the jerk role really well, considering that he played a jerk dad and husband on Home Improvement. Looking back on it, I mean that's just my characterization. Looking back at that TV show from so long ago, right? The 90s were quite different than they are now. He just wasn't a good dude. Don't get me wrong, though. Richard Karn, Al, love it. I don't think so, Tim. I don't think so, Tim. Every other day. I just use that phrase from Al. I am an Al, so I have to. I mean, Richard Karn is my sitcom spirit animal. And I always say, I don't think so, Tim. And it's even better when I'm actually talking to somebody named Tim. Usually it's to my wife, Astrid. Do I say, I don't think so, Tim, too? Or my kids who don't have Tim in any of their names cannot make Tim maybe an anagram. No, I don't think anyone. Well, Ellie does have a T in her name, so I could make it. No, but she doesn't have an M. No anagrams. Nobody. I say this, but I love that movie, or excuse me, that TV show. I love that TV show, but I don't love Tim Allen. So that's where I'm starting with. I wanted to start with that rant-ish because I think it's important for you, listener, to recognize where I'm coming from with this analysis of the psych content in the Santa Claus. And okay, I'm going to stop ranting about Tim Allen.
You wouldn't believe the traffic out here. Yeah, same to you! And that's not very ladylike.
I am going to start ranting about Scott Calvin. And the biggest thing that bugs me about this movie, he's really rude to Neil. That's all he wants. Like, Neil is just trying to be a psychiatrist. And he's just really mean to not only Neil, but the entire field of psychiatry.
I am a doctor. No, he's not. He's a psychiatrist.
I am not a psychiatrist. I do not have a medical degree, but I stand with my mental health brethren. I'm not a mental health person either, but I stand with them. PSY, people. PSY. That is Psy, and I stand with them. I stand together with my fellow head people. And Scott Calvin is a real jerk. And putting those ideas into Charlie's head about psychiatry is ridiculous. In the beginning of the movie, Charlie goes, he is a doctor. And Scott goes, he's not a doctor. He's a psychiatrist. And it's like, bro, he has done far more work than you have in toy sales? It's kind of difficult to figure out what Scott Calvin's job actually is. He's not a toy manufacturer. He works for a toy maker, but he's not the toy manufacturer, which is kind of an interesting detail that he is not the toy maker at his job in the real world. Santa isn't the toy maker either in the lore, right? It's the elves who make the toys. Santa's just the big boss, and he's the one who uses his magic to deliver all those toys that the elves make. The elves are the true heroes, right? They're the ones who, even in the movie, they're the ones who break him out of jail. So, I mean, like, come on now. Neil has probably and psychiatry, for those who are uninitiated here, psychiatry is one of the longest residency interns and residencies that a medical doctor has to do. So you're talking 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of medical school, so 8 years of higher education just on its own. I think a 1 or maybe even a 2-year internship, at least 1 year internship after medical school. So we're talking 1 or 2 more years. So we're at 10 already. Let's just say Neil did a 2-year internship. 10. I could be wrong about the internship, so just bear with me there. But like residency is like 4+ years. Some other residencies are much less than that, like 2 or 3 years. And there's so many specialties of medicine that I couldn't possibly tell you what all of them are, but it is one of the longest ones. So Neil has been training in psychiatry for 10+ years, right? He's got to get the background in biology and chemistry and all of that. And then he goes to medical school, and then he does his internships, and then he does his residency. And then probably at that point, he is working in a private practice, and he marries Laura, and Laura already has Charlie from her marriage with Scott Calvin. So she's no longer Laura Calvin anymore. She's Laura Miller. Charlie remains Charlie Calvin, which is nice. In addition to Scott Calvin saying that Neil is not a doctor, he's a psychiatrist, there are so many jokes at the expense of psychiatry in this movie. I'm not entirely sure where the hate for psychiatry began. Maybe it was Freud and all of his weirdness. Maybe it was all of the focus on women and hysteria and things like that around the turn of the 20th century. I don't really know where the psychiatry hate came from. Probably from a number of sources. But I think now, and maybe even in the 1990s, it wasn't necessarily a terrible profession. Like, you can't call it the worst thing ever, but maybe I'm being a little too idealistic or naive in that. And okay, fine. Maybe I'm looking at it from the perspective of let's not take a dump all over mental health providers, even if they have some really odd ideas. Maybe if they have odd ideas, we should take a dump on them. Like Leo Marvin, Richard Dreyfuss's character in What About Bob? He wasn't a great psychiatrist because he was very selfish. But I don't think Neil's trying to be selfish at all in this movie. I think he's really actually trying to help Charlie and his age grapple with belief and not really knowing how to approach being the stepdad, so being on the outside of the parental triangle, really being the far point of the parental triangle, and it's just sort of trying to offer his expertise and then just getting shot down. Like Scott Calvin calls him a shrink at one point. He calls him a pinhead. He outright calls him an idiot, wants to fight him when he's Santa.
Don't make me beat you up, Neil.
That's not Santa. And it's just like, what? And it's hard to know whether or not Scott's hatred of, or dislike, maybe not hatred, it's hard to know whether or not he hates Neil, but his dislike of Neil is rooted in the fact that he dislikes psychiatry or psychology, or if he just dislikes Neil as being the interloper into the parenting situation, right? And marrying his ex-wife because he has some paternalistic ownership of his previous wife, like something like that. It's hard to know in the movie. We don't get any information about where Scott Calvin's dislike of Neil comes from. Now, on top of that, there is no real separation between psychology and psychiatry in this movie, which is, I think, a great point to make to students who want to use a Christmas film like this. It's tough because in the United States, other than the state of New Mexico, psychologists, people who are licensed by a state to practice mental health treatment, are not allowed to prescribe medication. The state of New Mexico has different rules, but every other state, as far as my understanding goes, there are these rules. I can't walk around with my Ph.D. and a prescription pad and being like, you get antidepressants and you get antidepressants and here's some Xanax and everyone gets some Xanax. I can't do that. Can't walk around doing that. First of all, I'm not licensed. So I imagine that there's a difference for licensing. But, I just because I have a doctorate, I can't run around and do that. But Neil has an MD and he can prescribe medication. He also appears to engage in psychotherapy. It seems like what his main practice is. We see him engage in that kind of psychotherapy with Charlie quite a bit in the movie. And so I guess Scott thinks that they're all the same. Everyone gets the same kind of treatment from anyone professing to be a psychiatrist, psychologist, or what have you. And it's really a bummer because psychotherapy is quite different from the kinds of roles that psychiatrists take, right? Psychiatrists tend to take a biomedical approach to treatment, and so they will use biomedical treatments more often than not, which includes psychopharmacology, using psychoactive drugs to treat an illness, to treat a mental illness like depression or bipolar disorder, where a psychologist does not necessarily have that option, right? A lot of times psychologists will work in tandem with somebody's psychiatrist or somebody's general practitioner doctor to come to an eclectic approach where the psychotherapist does the psychotherapy, the talk therapy, and has ongoing sessions with the person, where the general practitioner or the psychiatrist or both do the biomedical treatment side. They're the ones who are prescribing medication. It's kind of a lot to handle as a person trying to navigate a health system, especially in the United States when the health system's not great, and it's hard to navigate even if you don't have mental health problems. And so the lumping of the two by Scott Calvin does nobody any favors. It puts a bad taste in everyone's mouth about psychiatry, about psychology. And, we're supposed to dislike Scott at the beginning of the movie and then, like him at the end of the movie when he becomes Santa and he's like, I've embraced my role as Santa Claus. He still is mean about psychology and psychiatry. Like he doesn't change that. And that's sort of an element not only of Tim Allen as the actor, but of Leo Benvenuti and Steve Rudnick and John Pasquin as far as their dislike and terrible treatment of psychology. It's just this is a rant. I'm getting a lot off my chest here. I have felt this way for many, many years about this part of the movie, and I'm so glad that I decided to do a solo episode for Christmas, give my colleagues a chance to relax, not have to worry about being on the pod, and just lay into this movie. Again, I do like it. I still do like it. Does it hold up? No, but I've been harboring this anger toward how psychology and psychiatry are presented in this movie. I was like, I have an outlet now. I have an outlet. And this is an appropriate outlet. This is an appropriate outlet. Now, the last thing I want to mention about psychiatry in this movie is that bless Eric Lloyd for his supreme child acting in this one, because he is perhaps the most level-headed person in that parenting trio, and even throws back some of the things that Neil has said to him, which are actually really good things to say to a child trying to manage their beliefs, or in the case at the end where Neil and Laura finally believe Scott is Santa, and finally believe their son, who has been saying it, ever since. He even tells Neil, like, don't worry, man. Just let out that childhood joy. It's cool. You are with safe people. Okay. He also helps his own father, Scott, in that year, or not really a year, but like 11 months worth of time where, Scott has to get his affairs in order before Thanksgiving. And he's like, come on, Dad, you remember all the fun times we had. That's why all of this stuff is happening to you, because it's real. It's magic and it's real. So you need to recognize that it is real, So I mean, he is the most adult in the movie. He is the most adult in the movie. He sort of embodies how the elves feel about the whole thing, and sort of the bridge between the magic world up in the North Pole and the real world with 3 adult children, right? So Laura, Neil, and Scott Calvin. I think it's great how they flip that one on its head. Sort of unexpected that Charlie is really the most mature, even if he does believe in Santa Claus. Really brings a sense of maturity to Charlie, and tells all of his parents, 1, grow up, this is real, and 2, it's okay to believe in magic and in Santa Claus.
The reason we're here is that this is far more serious than a boy believing or not believing in Santa Claus.
That's right, because Charlie thinks that this whole thing actually happened.
Scott, what was the last thing you and Charlie did before you went to bed Christmas Eve?
We shared a bowl of sugar and some shots of brown liquor. Played with my shotguns. Field dressed a cat. Looked for women. I read him a book.
What book?
Hollywood Wives. The night before Christmas. Folks, come on.
And did you go to the North Pole?
This is ridiculous. I don't have time for this.
Ridiculous or not, Scott. For Charlie, this isn't some dream. It is real. You need to sit down with Charlie, explain to him you are not Santa Claus.
Which brings me to my next discussion. I am a fan of magical experiences and supernatural ideas. Not that I believe in them myself, but I do enjoy how world building is used to create these magical experiences on film. Like, it's perhaps, for me, a slightly better experience than reading, because I see so many images when I read in my mind. It's hard to keep track of the imagination and the world building that I am doing in my home. Not that in my own head, not to say that I dislike reading, but I think film, to me, it makes it easier for me to sort of enjoy the art of fiction and the art of literature in a way that I don't get with listening to a podcast, like a true story podcast, or reading a book, or listening to an audiobook. I don't get the same experience that I do with film. And I really like how this movie, which is probably part of the reason why I still like this movie, right? It's on a scale, on a needle of like versus dislike. I lean toward like, despite the way that psychiatry and psychology are treated, the fact that Tim Allen is Tim Allen, the way that the movie, and the way that the writers and director handle the supernatural elements and trying to ground the world of Santa Claus in real life. Not to say that it hasn't been done before. Miracle on 34th Street, I think, did a really great job of grounding some ideas about Santa in the real world. There is less, I want to say, magic in Miracle on 34th Street. It's supposed to be a more grounded film with just the Santa Claus character. Now, the difference here is that the Santa Claus has to tell us how Santa Claus is created from normal folks in the world. And that's where the Claus comes in, right? And so while other movies have shown the magic of Santa in a real world setting, I think this one does a really good job of world building beyond that, and leaves some openings for the Santa Claus too, which I think is great. You need a Mrs. Claus. It's the Mrs. Claus. Now, the way that the movie goes about that is also problematic, but, it's fine. We're not talking about that movie now, so I'm going to ignore it. I still have my thoughts. But, we've got this whole idea, the legality of Santa Claus. You put on the suit, you are imbued with the magic of Santa Claus, and everyone around you accepts that you are now Santa Claus because it is one of the easiest things. It's put on the suit, deliver the presents, you're now Santa Claus. I love it. It's so simple. It's so simple. And because Charlie is in a stage of, do I believe, do I not believe, do I believe, do I not believe, he's sort of teeter-tottering on that. It allows him to shed off the stuff that Neil had told him about it and really engage with the belief side, which is fun because we tend to watch these as kids, or at least you're my age. You watch this as a kid, or maybe even a slightly older kid. Maybe it doesn't hit as well as an adult in the 90s, but to me, it feels like we get to be Charlie. We get to just be like, yeah, flying, Santa's reindeer, all of that stuff. Put on the suit. Why is it so easy for him to fall down the roof? Ignore that. A new person. This is how a new person becomes Santa Claus. They do eventually die. This is how a new person becomes Santa Claus. It's ridiculous. It's awesome. And for the year that Scott is going through all of these metamorphoses, which I gotta say, they should have. You can make this movie a psychological thriller. You could make this movie you can recut this movie with different music underneath and make it a psychological thriller. When he closes when Scott Calvin closes his mirror and he sees his face full of white hair and he's like, ah, you can put some creepy music under that and oh man, change the lighting a little bit. Bam, it is a psychological thriller. He goes through 11 months of these changes and he is just like, things are changing and he doesn't want to believe it, but he has to because there's things that are changing. He's starting to love sweets. He lies about what's going on, and Charlie gets sort of taken away from him because the Millers ask for full custody, and it's a lot of stuff happening within 11 months, and the way they play the magic when he shaves and then his beard pops up, it's great. But for a Disney movie, I get it. Scott plays like he is like it's strange bewilderment, when in actuality, if this was something that was like real and supernatural, a person would be going out of their mind. And Neil, as a psychiatrist, would likely be like, this person needs to be evaluated for psychotic disorder. Like, this is psychosis through and through. Even in the 90s, schizophrenia was a big deal. And people would be like, this person thinks they're Santa Claus. This needs evaluation. He probably needs to be hospitalized for fear that he might harm somebody with his ideas about reindeer or something like that. But it's a Disney movie, so they play it off like it's hilarious. The person's going through changes. Oh, man. Maybe it was an allegory for a midlife crisis. I don't know. Maybe it is all in Scott Calvin's head. Maybe there is treatment of this movie, an analysis of this movie where you just take everything away, you strip everything away, and just see if you can characterize it as a man going through a midlife crisis. You know, he's just got recently divorced. While his job is going great, he falls into a depression and starts eating a lot of sweets. His kid gets taken away because of this spiraling down. He thinks he's Santa Claus. Oh, that's a psych thriller right there. I'll have to call Tim Allen about this one. No, I'm just kidding. No. All right. The two things that I want to focus on with these beliefs is one, Charlie. Charlie engages throughout the movie in what is called belief perseverance, even in spite of what others are saying. Hey, your dad's not Santa Claus. Don't do that. You know, you had a wild and vivid, maybe lucid dream on Christmas Eve one year, and now this year you need to stop talking about it. You really need to stop talking about it. And maybe your dad is an influence on you, and we just don't know what you two were talking about while you're with him. So you don't get to see him anymore. And Charlie's just like, no, I did this. I am not going to update my beliefs. And everything he sees that is happening with Scott Calvin, his dad, every time he sees them, he's like, you're getting bigger. You're getting whiter hair. You are becoming kinder. Kids are sitting on your lap to ask for presents. Like, there is evidence upon evidence that Scott Calvin is becoming Santa Claus. And so Charlie remains steadfast in his belief, regardless of what other people say. Now, belief perseverance is generally used in a negative sense, but it just means that you decide to keep a belief in spite of evidence to the contrary. That's all belief perseverance is, and that's what Charlie is showing in this movie. Belief perseverance, and he doesn't give it up. At no point does he give it up. And the final thing that he does to get his dad to recognize you are Santa friggin' Claus and it's Thanksgiving and you got to go up to the North Pole now is he's the only one who perseveres in this belief. The only one who considers it to be so serious that he cannot change his mind. He remains the only constant person. Everyone else changes their beliefs. Scott Calvin changes his beliefs. Laura changes her beliefs when she recognizes something that Scott tells her from her childhood. Neil recognizes that he becomes Santa Claus, and he was like, "Wait, what?" You know, and he eventually gets his wiener whistle from Oscar Mayer. You know, these kinds of things. All of them eventually get the idea. We don't see anyone else. in the movie change their beliefs, but those people change their beliefs. Charlie is the only one who does not.
Your parents thought I'd never amount to anything.
Oh, wait. And don't go yet. I have something for you. It's Santa.
Scott.
Neil?
Santa?
It's okay, Neil.
Here. It's it's my Christmas present for you. It's the custody papers. And I want you to come and see Charlie as often as you can.
You can count on it. Thanks, Laura. Merry Christmas.
What's all this boo-hooing going on here? Hey, how you doing?
It's nothing, Bernard. I'm just saying goodbye to Charlie.
Well, goodbye. Charlie, you still got the glass ball, right?
Yeah.
Well, all you gotta do is shake it whenever you want to see your dad.
Really?
He can come back to see you anytime, day or night. Hey, have I ever steered you wrong? Nice sweater. Hey, did we make this?
Laura, he's sucking us into his delusions. Look at the elaborate measures he's taken.
Neil, relax. I'll explain it to you later.
Where'd he go?
Which I think is refreshing and especially important for children like mine who still believe in Santa. And we're trying to keep that belief alive. They wrote letters to Santa. They get presents from Santa because we want to keep them in this as long as possible. And I'll tell you a quick story, listener. I almost ruined it for my younger sister. We have 11-year age gap. And one year I mentioned something that my mom got her that was going to be from Santa because that's what she asked Santa for. I didn't live with them at the time, but she was like, I don't know, 8 or 9, something like that. So I was already an adult and clearly did not believe in Santa Claus anymore. And I mentioned it around her and I was like, oh, wait, oh, shoot. And I sort of screwed the pooch. Luckily, my sister tells me that she was already thinking that things were weird, and she was really only keeping the belief to make our parents feel better, which kind of funny. But I sort of want to keep the magic alive for my kids, and I think the movie that does a really good job of, it's kind of like what Elf does a really good job of keeping the kid in it, doesn't give up their belief, remains perseverant in their belief. You know, it's important for a movie like this, for a movie like Miracle on 34th Street, for a movie like Klaus, which is a newer one, which is an amazing lore movie about how letters to the North Pole work. And a guy, just a big dude named Klaus, big dude in Norway or some Scandinavian country just named Klaus, who receives letters from all over the world. And sort of a backstory to where Santa Claus came from, the Klaus, and that these kinds of movies are really where it's at. I love them. I love them.
Well, I don't know, Scott. You're as healthy as a horse.
Yeah. Clydesdale.
Okay, look, so what? You put on a little weight. A little weight? Does this look like a little weight to you? Weight can fluctuate from year to year. Fluctuate? You make it sound like I'm retaining water. I've gained 45 pounds in a week.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about before I leave you all with some Christmas cheer. Oh boy. On a recent episode, Dr. Jordan Waggy and I talked about the fat phobia surrounding Bridget Jones's Diary. Now, I wanted to bring that conversation back here with a quick rundown of all of the fat phobic dialogue and quote unquote jokes that are made at the expense of fat people and Santa Claus being a fat person in the lore specifically, right? So again, I mentioned that Tim Allen's not a great person, and he, generally speaking, makes jokes at a lot of people's expenses. Many people who are different from him, he makes jokes about all of them. If you want to go find out more, you can go find his Twitter, and you will find joke upon joke of people who are not like him. And that's the kind of writing that I think Benvenuti and Rudnick did on this movie, right? Like, I probably spotted this year having that idea in my head because I just talked to Jordan about this. I would say maybe every 5 minutes or so there was a joke about at the expense of fat people. Like, the fat phobia is really strong in this movie. And there are two solid scenes that I want to point out here. And then I'll mention a few other ones. The first scene is when Scott is going through the changes during this year, and he wakes up and he's like, "Oh, I got a little bigger." He doesn't say anything. This is all just like dialogue free acting. He holds on to his stomach and he jiggles it around, and he can't wear any of his suits or anything like that because they're all tailored for a smaller person. And so he's late to his meeting at his job.
Calvin.
Sorry, the dry cleaner in my neighborhood went up in smoke, some big chemical fire, all my clothes, poof, gone.
God, your weight. What happened?
Bee sting. Evidently, I'm allergic. Almost killed me. But the guy at the emergency room says the swelling will go down. I hope. So, did I miss anything?
No, we were just about to order lunch.
Great! I'm starving.
I'll have a salad and iced tea and dressing on the side.
Pasta and tomatoes, and very light on the oil. Can you do that?
And I'll have a Caesar, no dressing. And one of those homemade cookies, the warm chocolate chip, no nuts. And a little slice of cheesecake, creme brulee, and hot fudge sundae. Extra hot fudge. On the side.
Anything to drink?
Ice cold milk.
Stung by a bee, Scott?
A big bee?
And they're all surprised to see him dressed in sweats. And his sweatshirt and his sweatpants are very tight on his body. And he kind of just tries to play it off, but everyone's just like really shocked, right? And they play this role of, and especially Peter Boyle, plays this like, we're worried about you bullshit. And I really don't like it because it's just like, and then it gets really bad when they're ordering, like, oh, we're just ordering lunch. He's like, oh, great. And he decides to order all of the sweets because his sweet tooth is, Santa has a sweet tooth, right? Cookies and milk. So he's getting this sweet tooth activated, and he grabs all of the, no mains, nothing. He just wants all of the dessert with extra chocolate, all that stuff. And he's the last one to finish eating, and everyone's just looking at him in disgust. And he goes, they're looking at him, and he goes, oh, it was a bee sting. I got stung by a bee. And his partner from the beginning of the movie, where they successfully sold a doll or whatever with this woman, is like, are you sure it was a bee sting? And he's like, it was a really big bee, right? So he's trying to play off his size as an allergic reaction to getting stung by a bee, right? An allergic anaphylactic reason. It made him balloon out, whatever. And they're incredulous because he's eating all these sweets. And it's just like, who cares what he's eating, y'all? And no, why are you worried about him? Why are you worried about him? I think his doctor, which is a follow-up scene, I think his doctor does a good job of sort of drawing the line. It's like, oh, you just put on a little weight. And Tim Allen grabs his fat suit and goes, does this look like a little weight to you? And is just really mad and upset about it, right? This goes back to my treatment of psychological thrillers, just random stuff happening to him, right? So that one's probably the worst of the bunch. The second scene that I want to highlight is when he gets caught by the police. So he's at Laura Neal's house delivering presents for Laura Neal and Charlie. And they know that he's there. And so they converge on him. And he turns around and he goes, oh, officers, good evening. And One of them says, "Not for you, fat man." And he goes, "Fat man? That wasn't very nice." And they arrest him. And it's just like, wait, whoa. There's no reason to say that about him. Come on now. Don't be like that, guys. Ridiculous. Couple of other instances of fat phobia in the movie. The little girl in the beginning comments that Scott Calvin, as he put on the suit, which Scott Calvin said, like, look at the size of these things, right? He's got the giant pants, this giant coat that he has to wear the first night that he puts on the pant in suit. The little girl comments that she's not as big as he should be, and then he drinks some milk and he's like, I'm lactose intolerant. And later in the movie, when he sees her again, she's like, I got you soy milk, and he's like, oh, that milk tastes gross. It's really odd. It's really odd. Play for laughs. The lines play for laughs every single time, and it's just like, I don't really want to laugh at that anymore. It's not good, because even though, yes, we have the stereotype of Santa Claus being a fat and jolly man, as if, fat people are jolly or jolly people are fat, like this weird combination of adjectives to describe. It's kind of, it stings of, it's just another way to make heavier people feel bad about themselves, that we are making a situation where we can point and laugh at somebody who is large. And that's not great. I don't like that at all. So that is the big one. There's the second one, the second big one that I'm viewing it this year with the guys of the podcast in my mind. Like, I wanted to do a Christmas episode, and I'm like, oh my God, there's so much fat phobia in here. Ooh, boy. Let's take a step back from these fat jokes, yeah? And I am sure the Santa Claus 2 has just as many, because he becomes smaller Tim Allen when he's trying to court Charlie's teacher. Definitely fat phobia in all of this. We can stop doing that. I mean, we all get it, right? Santa Claus is supposed to be a larger dude. He's supposed to be, I have big belly laughs. So we can stop saying things about his weight, I suppose. Just make him some cookies. He loves the sweet stuff. Just make him some cookies. We don't need to say anything about his size anymore. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I just want to point out before I go that Santa Claus needs his business practices checked. He really does. He's backed by the coal industry. He uses child labor, even though the elves aren't really children. They look like children. That's enough for me. What's the structure of the North Pole manufacturing? Is it like, does he run like a dictatorship like Schindler in Schindler's List, right? But he gives his own kids special treatment? I don't know. His business practices need to be reviewed. Where's the FTC? Where's the FCC? Where's the SEC? All the other acronyms, right? The Bureau of Labor, whatever. He needs to be checked. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. A Happy New Year, too. The next episode will be out early next year, and we are looking forward to another calendar year running through the pod. It's going to be great. I hope you join us for that. Make sure you are smashing that like button, smashing that sharing button, taking a look at the merch options. I do plan on expanding the merch options here coming in the next year. That's a goal for me. So if you want to support the channel, that's some YouTube there. If you want to support the podcast, consider buying some merchandise. It's great comfy clothes. I love my 3/4 length shirts. I love my sweatshirt. It is so comfy. And the drawstrings stay in because they are wrapped. Whoo, yes. So check out our merch store. If you want to buy me a cup of coffee, take a look at my PayPal for the pod and drop a couple of dollars in there. Thank you so much for listening this calendar year. I appreciate it. Until the next episode, thanks for listening.